The Holler by Kyle Davian. Section 1. Some years earlier. Subsection 1. The young man had been standing on the street corner for quite some time. Several people had noticed it, and with good reason. School had been dismissed for the day long ago, and the street was nearly void of any children. The girl, however, waited patiently with her schoolbooks, held close to her breast, almost as if she was expecting the bus to stop by at any moment and cater her home. But that, of course, was impossible. Its last stop at the corner was over an hour ago. The wind began to pick up, blowing fresh fallen leaves across the sidewalks. As the crisp, colorful formations scurried across her path, the girl began to dance around them, throwing back her head of long golden hair and giggling in delight. Soon she was whistling, almost as if she was completely unaware that the sun was slowly fading beyond the horizon and that darkness would soon prevail over the town. It was already 5:30. Footsteps hurried past her. The shop owners. It was now time for them to leave, to go home to their families. That is, all except for Mabel Perkins, the antique shop dealer. She fumbled nervously with her set of keys as she tried to lock the front door to her place of business. After several unsuccessful attempts, she began to curse. Served her right, she thought. She ought not to be so damn cheap and put in a new lock like she knew she should. There! The lock finally gave and clicked itself into position. With a sigh of relief, she placed the keys deep into the forbidden recesses of her purse and began to make her way toward her home down the street. She was the last one to leave the town square. He had known that from the start. Every day she pulled the same shit, never altering her irritating habit. But today it was perfectly acceptable. The girl, this time, was still there. All alone. He got up from behind the abandoned building he had been crouching beside for the whole of the afternoon and began to cautiously walk towards the girl. Even from where he was, he could hear her still whistling that happy tune of hers. He suddenly stopped and cringed in his tracks as he heard the dried twig clearly snap in two under his stocky weight. His concern, though, was of a false nature. The girl had not heard and did not seem to care. The heavy footsteps began to approach her. She knew he was coming, knew that he would. He had been following her for days now, yet it did not seem to bother her. She continued to whistle. The young man was standing beside her now, his footsteps silenced. The girl began to sing carelessly to herself. As the wind picked up again, blowing even cooler air around them, the sun continued to descend in the far distance. So innocent, he thought. Yes, she was perfect. They all were, or at least they pretended to be. He, however, knew better. The girl bent over, laid her books down, grabbed a handful of these, threw them high over her head, laughing as they slowly rained around her. Got to have her. I must. Damn it, she's playing hard to get. She is. I know she is. The girl began to sing. London Bridge is falling down. She's making me suffer. I know her game. She and all the rest of them. Falling down. London Bridge is falling down. Flaunting her body at me. Damn little wretch. She wants it bad. London Bridge is falling down. She's making me suffer, damn bitch. She's making me suffer. Excuse me, he suddenly spoke, fumbling at his words. The girl halted her dance of innocence and looked up at the well-dressed young man. She smiled. Oh, hi. Stop it, just stop it. Wipe that damn leer off your face. You never know who's running around the streets this late. She giggled. Nope, we never do. Pause. Do we? No, we don't, he pressed, trying to keep his voice even and convincing. Then, reaching out with his hand, listen, sweetie, why don't I walk you home, okay? I'd never forgive myself if something bad happened to you out here all by yourself, all right? The girl tilted her head to one side and pondered the offer. It's what she'd been waiting for all along. Bitch, 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 bitch. Okay, if you're sure. After all, it wasn't as though he were a stranger. She'd been waiting a long time, and those eyes. The young man smiled with deep gratification. You made me very happy. I will feel very good about taking you home. I'm sure your parents will feel the same way. Humming, the girl clutched her school books and accepted the young man's outstretched hand. And with that, they began to walk away from the town square toward the woods. Just a little further, just a little further. You underage tramping then? Aren't they pretty? Huh? The leaves, aren't they pretty? Look. She pointed up to the dense maze of colorful autumn trees which they were approaching. I'm supposed to collect some of them for my science project in school tomorrow. I just don't know which ones. They're all so pretty. The grass between their hands tightened as they neared the center of the woods. The wind lapped gently behind them. Tell you what, said the man. Why don't we go through one of the trails? That way, you can pick up some leaves for your school project. Okay? Okay, she replied with a hesitation. I think that's a swell idea. Whore. Stupid little whore. Just a few steps more. Just a few more. The trees began to overlap as they walked deeper and deeper to the very core of the woods. Darkness began to conquer, and it continued to grow with every passing step. Just a little further. Just a little further. Aren't these pretty? He smiled, his grasp on her tiny hand tightening. The bend in the trail was sudden, and it drew them further into the intricate maze of the woods. The sun began to fade its last light. I hate science, but I love leaves. They're neat, don't you think? Bitch. And flowers. Whore. And squirrels and sinner. And itsy bitsy little... Her words were suddenly cut short as she was violently thrown to the ground. The young man loomed over her, quickly unbuttoning his shirt. The girl began to smile. His shirt came off swiftly, then his shoes, his socks, giggling. The belt came unbuckled, his zipper down. London Bridge is falling down. He saddled her in all his raw nakedness, his breathing erratic and patient. His eyes gleamed as his lips pursed in desperate want. My fair lady. His knees roughly embraced the virgin body of the girl between his legs as he kneeled over her, reaching down with greedy hands to unbutton her blouse. 3 blind mice. Uncontrollable orgasm overcame him as he reached for her tiny breast. The young girl, as if only now realizing what was really happening, suddenly began screaming. And then there was the pain, the inhuman pain, which was abruptly thrust inside of him, twisting its way deeper into his body. From within the recesses of his throat came a stifled groan. Blood began to spurt up in scalding globs from his mouth. See how they run. His eyelids became heavy. His senses began to numb. The razor-sharp instrument continued to carve deeper within him, reveling in its ecstasy. See how they run. He then fell back in deadly defeat, a silent scream frozen on his parted lips. The blood continued to flow. The girl continued to scream. Then suddenly, without warning, she began to laugh, then cry, then laugh again. The hurried sounds of footsteps fled away from her and the young man until they were no longer audible, and she was no longer conscious. The Holler by Kyle Davian. Section 1, Subsection 2. She slapped him, and she slapped him hard, just the way she'd done dozens of times over the years. But it gave her an indescribable joy, an overall feeling of unmatched ecstasy, the ecstasy of joyous, throbbing pain. She looked at him and waited patiently. His lips began to tremble slightly, and she found herself starting to breathe a little easier. And then suddenly, he began to eject gurgled cries and a continuous flow of tears. She sighed and then, out of habit perhaps, blinked. Soon she found herself smiling along with the crowd that now surrounded her and had seen her commit her act of love. As he cried incessantly, the group remained quiet. The older but sturdy woman made her way from the group of somber women and hurried outside to the front porch, where she approached a nervous-looking young man who was just finishing up on his 15th or so cigarette. He looked up. "Mama?" he asked rather blankly, a little weak. "It's a boy," she replied with no feeling whatsoever, perhaps a little disgust. He suddenly began crying into his hands, reaching for the Mrs. Jones, his mother, for a hug, but receiving none. She simply turned around and headed back toward the house. "Suzette," she called to her sister, "he's ready to go. Be quick about it." She then threw the watch to the floor and firmly stomped on it, successfully causing it to crack on the glass covering. She had preset it. "Be mindful of the time. Don't forget the time ever." With that, she went back with the women. They still had lots to do. Her husband, the Reverend Jones, weak of heart and spirit now, would soon be administering blessings against his wishes. That concludes the first section of The Holler by Kyle Davian. Join us for the next episode of The Holler, entitled Part 1, The Town, Chapter 1.